It's time for the Onyx News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the Onyx News Podcast, Margie K.
Welcome to the program. It is June 27th, 2026, and we have a lot going on here at the Onyx Network. If you check onyxnetwork.com, if you're looking for a good conference to go to at any time of the year, check our website out because we always have really good conferences and listings there. Things that we put on ourselves. We put on about 4 conferences a year, some in person, some on Zoom. But then we also list anyone's conference. So if you've got a big event coming up and you'd like to get it listed, just let us know. Send us an email through the website and we'll be sure to get that up. Also, we have a new channel coming very, very soon. We're about ready to break out with it. It's called the Woo Channel. And that is going to be mostly discussion about alternative healing, metaphysical subjects, consciousness, all woo stuff, as the left side says, the left brain side people say. So we're just going to embrace it. We're going to embrace the woo over there. My guest this evening is Linda Eastburn. I have known her for several years. I'm not exactly sure how long, but probably at least 10 years. Linda is an entrepreneur, author, real estate investor, and intuitive. She's the author of 4 books. She's a health intuitive and has a line of courses about living life intuitively. She's lectured at universities and medical institutions across the country, as well as speaking at numerous conferences. She has combined a world of business with the spiritual world of intuition to teach others an easier way to manifest life. Her remarkable experiences of synchronicity and intuitive perception have given her the foundation by which she teaches others to be highly successful, heal through difficulties, and empowered using their intuition. She was the host of the television and radio show Anomalies, and she founded the Academy of Intuitive Arts and the Midwest Research Society. Her films have played from art houses to movie theaters. Today, she's the host of the podcast Intuitive Diary with Linda Eastburn. And this evening, we're going to talk about her book, Threshold to Encounters, and a lot of other things. Welcome to the program, Linda.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here.
So good to have you back on. You are a busy lady, and you've done a lot since the last time we talked. And among them is your new book. So let's just start off with giving everybody kind of an overview of your book.
Well, it's called SPI, S-P-I. That stands for Superpowered Intuition. And it is about kind of back engineering my personal life and all the synchronicities that's happened to me, helping other people to know that can be something they can achieve, something they can work toward, and being kind of intuitively, guided toward that. Now, that's my book, Threshold to Encounters. I have, of course, the podcast, Linda Eastburn YouTube channel, which is about cryptids. And that book is something I wrote a couple of years ago. And it entails so many experiences that people I've interviewed have had regarding Bigfoot. But also, I was a UFO researcher for a lot of years. So I began to see the overlap between the UFO community and the Bigfoot community, even though those two communities often don't really communicate highly with one another. There was just so many things that overlap between them. I could not help but see that because I'd been so involved in the UFO community. Bigfoot has a phenomenal way of appearing, disappearing, behaving in ways that we can't explain. Now, not every person that sees a Bigfoot sees them in that fashion, because oftentimes they will just see them as a flesh and blood creature. But the people who do see them in kind of a different way, they can't deny that these things have an overlay with a lot of the UFO phenomena, in that they come, they go, they do not behave like normal physics would say they should behave. So,
Right.
that just is an ongoing experience that I have doing all of the podcasts that I do on cryptids.
I think anybody who's been a researcher for any length of time eventually does come to that conclusion that all of these things are connected. Spirits, Bigfoot, extraterrestrials. Is there a single phenomena that would explain why these things are connected?
The only thing that I can come up with, and this is just theory, it has nothing to do with anything that's deeply based in reality, but it does seem like that there's an overlay of reality that goes beyond just our physical reality. We have such a limited resource with our five senses to judge reality at all. And so if you go just one step beyond that, it does seem like that there's another reality that's sitting there. Now, just recently, because I know you're a remote viewer, I'm a remote viewer, just recently, a group of us looked at kind of where these alien entities fall. And it seems like that there's almost a stratosphere around the Earth that they abide. And we can't see that. We have no concept of it, but they're always present there. And they interact with our reality here, on the face of the earth in multiple ways for reasons that we may know or may not know. But Bigfoot seems to be more ingrained in a nature setting, like, the keepers of the woods. That's kind of a Native American thought, but they're kind of connected with that, but still connected also with this, stratosphere around the earth that tends to be not our reality, but a reality just beyond this. And for some reason, this reality interacts with us on a consistent basis, but we don't know exactly what, why, or how.
Yeah, and a lot of people are having sort of an awakening going on.
Mm-hmm.
They're raising their consciousness level. And this just seems to be across the board, worldwide, and people are beginning to see things they didn't used to. Do you have any idea why that would be going on?
Well, I think we're far more aware of things. I think just like the disclosure that's going on right now with UFOs, I think the more people become aware of their presence, the more people will become acquainted with phenomena that happens all the time, but they're just not paying attention to it. There could be a craft overhead, a UFO craft overhead, and they just don't see it because they're not looking up. They're just not paying attention to it. Now, I just had a story today. It was just very bizarre. A woman was driving down a road and she saw a plane that looked two-dimensional. It was a black kind of silhouette of a plane that was just above the car next to her. It was about 2 stories up, she said. And as she looked at it, she thought, this is huge. And, why is no one noticing it? She tried to get the attention of the guy in the car to look up, and he was looking up and, he didn't see it. He honestly just didn't see it. So it was just her. She was the one that was aware of this. No one else could actually be aware of it. So this plane kind of turned a left turn. It didn't bank. It just went, kind of at an angle. She followed it. And then the next, 4 or 5 hours, she had missing time. She has absolutely no idea what happened during that time. She ended up in a park. When she came to in this park, it was nighttime. This journey had started around noon that day. She has no idea where she went, what she did, or what happened to her. So there are incidences like that we just honestly can't explain, but she was the only one that was aware that this plane was there. So it was there for her. I don't think it was there for anyone else. So, how do you explain that sort of thing? I don't know. People can be aware of some stuff, but if you can't even see the plane, you can't be aware of it. And no one else saw it.
And did you say it was all black?
It was a black silhouette of a huge aircraft, a plane. It wasn't like a UFO. It was like a plane. And it was two-dimensional, just flat, like a piece of construction paper or something stuck up there in the air, but enormous. And she just couldn't understand how no one could see it, but she was the only one that saw it. So this was something that said, her perception was able to be aware of that, but no one else's was. But the same woman had 3 encounters with Bigfoot. And this woman was very, very stable, very rational, very sane person, very professional individual. These are just the story of her life. It's just what's happened to her.
Tell us a little bit about her encounters with Bigfoot.
Oh, they're just phenomenal. The first one was she was on a turnpike and she saw two. One was a head larger than the other one, but they were large. And they were kind of a lighter colored, reddish, kind of golden colored hair. And what really stood out was that the hair was very long on the back side. They were walking parallel to her as she drove down this turnpike. No other cars around, just these two Bigfoot in a field. And as they're walking there, they're moving toward a wooded area. She didn't have a concept of Bigfoot. This is some time back. So she was just thinking, she didn't know what she saw. She just kind of put that in the back of her mind. It didn't fit in her world. So it wasn't like she ignored it, but she didn't talk about it either. She didn't really explore it. It was just something over there in a field, and she didn't know for sure what it was. She'd heard of Bigfoot, but, she thought it was probably on the West Coast, where she'd heard about them. But never in her mind did she even think Bigfoot when she looked at these things. They were just very odd, very different, and very unusual. And so she just kind of forgot about it. But a couple of years later, she was she was taking a drive one day around, in the middle of the afternoon. She just really liked to get out in nature. So she was going up this kind of mountain road. And, it was pretty primitive area, but she loved that. She liked being out in nature. So she's driving through this road and she runs over a creek bed and punctures her tire, and she has a flat tire. Now she realizes this was like way back before cell towers were available, before cell phones existed hardly. She had a flip phone, but it wasn't very prominently active, And she's out there in Timbuktu. There's no signal. But she realizes she can't change the tire. Here she is stuck, and she's going to have to get to some place where she can get some help. And there are no houses to speak of around. So she starts walking, and she starts walking up this hill because she thinks if she gets close enough to a cell tower somewhere, she might be able to get a signal out. And she goes by this house, and this guy's kind of angry sort of person in the yard. So she keeps going and kind of bypasses that place, and there's no other house she crosses. She keeps going and going and going and going. And finally, she gets to a place, where she's kind of at a crossroads that can be, that she can get a signal. She gets out to 911. She gets a hold of the forest rangers. They know where she is because of the crossroads that she's at. And then she just has to wait. By this time, it's dark, and it's forever. It's forever before they come. She's in flip-flops, if you can imagine that. So she's in these flip-flops, and one of them is practically torn by now, and it's not a comfortable walk. Walk for miles at this point. So she decides, okay, there's kind of a sandy area in the road. She's going to lay down. She's exhausted. It's dark by now. She's going to wait out, But she understands she's out in the woods. This is not, there are all kinds of creatures. There are, bobcats out there. There's all kinds of things that could be bear or anything. So she gets a stick before she lays down. She's just got this long stick, by her, so she can kind of, at least have some kind of weaponry beside her. And she wakes up with this really odd thing that's hovering over her. It doesn't touch her, but she can hear it breathing, and she smells this atrocious stench. It's just horrible. She said it was just unbelievable. And so this thing is like hovering over her, and she immediately, she panics. So she jumps up, she gets some distance from her. She pulls up the stick. And as she pulls up the stick, she's pushing it toward the Bigfoot and trying to get it to move away because, if it was a bear or a bobcat or something like that, that's what you would do to get it to just, you look big and you try to, to intimidate it and get it to move away. Well, this thing moved back a short distance, but it just kept coming toward her and kept coming toward her. And there was like this long span of time where she was trying to fight it off, and she didn't know how much it was going to come after her. And finally, she was so exhausted. She finally decided, okay, it's going to kill me. I'm dead. That's it. She just turns around and starts walking down the road. By the time, and this thing followed her for a distance. It followed her for maybe a mile or so. And then she couldn't hear it anymore, but she just kept walking because she didn't know what else to do. So by the time the forest people got there to rescue her, they were, she was 2 miles. Actually, she'd walked 2 miles back toward her car at that point when they found her. And she explained this to them, and she's frantic. It was, just absolute trauma for her. And
Wow.
they said, this is not uncommon. We have Bigfoot here. We hear about it all the time. And so she felt at least comfortable with that, but they got her back to civilization. They took her to the hospital. Actually, it was the hospital where she worked. And she's in the emergency room, where they're examining her. She had a couple of sprained ankles. Her feet were all torn up, and she was dehydrated, just exhausted, and in a traumatic trauma experience. Her sister arrives. She explains all this to her in hysteria, and of course, everyone's hearing every word she says. So she said that was almost comforting, though, because after the fact, the people that she worked with would come up to her and say, "Hey, my uncle saw Bigfoot out there," or "My cousin," or "We were out hiking and saw a Bigfoot." So she felt a little bit more normal after that, but that was extremely traumatizing. And for a woman who really loved going into the woods, she stopped going into the woods for an extremely long span of time. She can now, but she couldn't there for a long time. So that was her second experience. Her third one, we had a little bit of the woo involved. She, from these two first experiences, which by now she has accepted the fact fully that they were both Bigfoot because it just fit the bill. They were both very tall, extremely hairy, muscle tone was huge. Just their whole behavior and the stench, everything. She started researching these. It's like, yeah, that was a Bigfoot. The third time she's out with her husband. Her husband liked to jog. And he's jogging through a wooded area, and she's walking. She makes it back to the truck before he does. And there's this big, tall creature on the other side of their truck. And he hadn't made it back yet. She was just there by herself. And her first thought is that's a person, but then she realized it's way taller than the cab of the truck. And, it was way taller than any person she'd ever seen. So she immediately thought, okay, that's a Bigfoot as well. And so she stops. She doesn't say anything. She just observes it for a time. And it starts moving at a really fast pace back toward a wooded area, goes behind a tree that could not in any way have covered the full body of the Bigfoot. It walks behind the tree. She's expecting it to exit from the other side of the tree, and nothing comes out the other side. And there's no way at all that tree could have hidden the body of that Bigfoot. So at that point, she's going, okay, what happened to it? So now she's like back in this camp of trying to analyze what is this thing if it's not just a flesh and blood creature and it just disappears like that behind a tree. There's no way it could have just gone nowhere. And so that was her third experience, and just a very unusual grouping of 3 different Bigfoot encounters over a period of a few years.
Wow. Well, she's definitely an experiencer. Yeah, UFOs and Bigfoot. I have had several people tell me that they have seen a Bigfoot disappear into a tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is very common.
That seems to be a common element. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
what do you think that is?
Yeah, I think they disappear into trees. A lot of people think they're part of the Fae world. That they're like the fairy world, but they are the keepers of the forest. Native American legends say, they're the keepers of the forest. So maybe they're the spirit of the trees. I don't know. I mean, I don't have anything to back that up other than it does seem like their behavior. They seem very protective of the woods. They get very upset when, civilization starts infringing on their territory, the woods. And they seem to have some kind of alignment with trees. I don't know. It's hard to say. Exactly what causes that. We don't have any physics behind what would make that happen, but we don't have any physics behind a lot of things. So, but it certainly is an ongoing story.
Well, these subjects, usually something triggers someone to get their interest in it. So what was your trigger?
Well, in the UFO phenomena, it was, just the mystery of it. We had a flap of UFO activity back in, 89 or so here in close to Springfield, Missouri. And it was on the news. It was everywhere. I didn't realize that there were groups of people that actually, gathered together and talked about this or researched it. I had no idea. But once it was on the news, I found out about the local MUFON group that met monthly. And so I started going to that. And even though I hadn't had a personal experience myself, I was just fascinated with everything that was happening, within the community and all the stories that everyone had, but also that they took it this seriously. Now, I did have this really kind of unusual thing happen. I was working in hypnosis at the time. So I did a lot of regression work. And so the local head of MUFON was very busy doing a lot of regression work with people who felt like they were experiencers or abductees. That's what they called them at the time. So he shuffled a lot of people over my way to do hypnotic regression. And I found that just even more fascinating. I've been working with people with, concentration and passing a test and losing weight and quitting smoking and things like this. So when that whole hypnotic regression for looking into an abduction came along, it's like, well, this is a whole new ballgame. I mean, this was just a very interesting way to utilize hypnosis for me. So as I did that, I mean, I put out little ads saying I would do, hypnotic regression for free if anyone had felt like they'd had a UFO encounter, or if they felt like they'd had an abduction experience. And so I started getting a lot of calls that they claimed they didn't call afterwards. And I could trace that back into some kind of government body that was contacting me and then denying that they contacted me. So I realized I was on somebody's radar, because of those ads, probably. But another really weird thing that happened, and this was most unusual, was, one morning, my mom would call, about every day and or every other day or something like that, and talk about 10 minutes. It was the "I'm okay, you're okay" phone call, anything new in your world, anything new in mine. And this was I remember it was a Tuesday, because it was that night was the MUFON meeting that night. And so she called and we were talking, and while we were talking, she said she could hear something on the line. And I said, well, what is that? I don't know. I didn't hear anything. I just kind of ignored it. But when she hung up, I could clearly hear something. So I continued hanging on to that phone for a while. And the weirdest thing, on the other end of this, there was a constant click, 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 like as if there was something being recorded. Now, we're talking back in the early 90s. So this was before digital recording. This would have been old-fashioned, old school, tape recording. And so as I held on to it, I could hear like something scooting, like a chair being scooted out on like a concrete floor. Could hear several footsteps, heavy footsteps, like a male on concrete or tile. And I could hear metal against metal, like a file cabinet or something. And then the heavy footsteps back, and then screeching of the chair again. And I'm going, what is this? I held on for maybe 10, 15 minutes hearing this most bizarre sound. I have no idea what's going on the other end of this phone, but it was something that I had never heard before or expected to hear before. So finally, after about 10, 15 minutes, it was longer than the period of time I talked to my mother. I know that. But I suddenly heard this beep, and the clicking that had been consistent through that entire time stopped. There was no more sound. I hung on for about 2 or 3 more minutes, thinking there might be. By this time, my arm's getting really tired of holding the phone, and nothing. So I hung up, and of course, I don't know what to do. So I called my, really close friend, and she didn't know either, but she said, she had read a lot about these. She was a mystery writer, and she had also read a lot of mystery books. And she said there was this one book she read that said you could call this one number and it would give you your number back. But if your phone was bugged, it wouldn't give you your number back. So I thought, well, we'll try that. So I called it, and it did not give me my number back. So I thought, well, that's really weird. So I called everybody I knew and asked them to call the same number, see if they got their number back. Everyone else got their number back but me. So there's another part of the mystery. So, okay, is my phone bugged, So that night, it was the MUFON meeting. I went, my friend went with me, my husband went with me, and they were showing some video of a documentary of a case down in Georgia. Some guy gone down there to do a documentary of a UFO case in Georgia or somewhere. And he had a whole crew with him, a whole filming crew with him. And at that site in Georgia, all of them had, a room at this hotel. And this one night, the entire filming crew got calls starting at 2:15, 3:15, 4:15, all through the night. And they were just hang-up calls. And they all went down, switchboard the next day and said, what the heck was going on with all these calls? Switchboard said nothing came through their switchboard. Absolutely nothing. So that was bizarre. So we went home after the MUFON meeting that night. Remember, it was just that morning I had that bizarre call that I hung on to, and we went to sleep. And 12:15, hang up call. 1:15, hang up call. 2:15, hang up call. So at that point, I did recognize that someone probably within that MUFON group, was keeping an eye on a lot of people because they knew the film we watched that night. They knew the call had come in. I knew that, somebody was on my phone that day. And somebody didn't either wanted to scare me away from doing the regressions or didn't want me talking about the regressions. I'm not sure exactly what. But later on, I found out a lot of people in that same MUFON group had those very same experiences where someone would be on the line and you could hear them on the line. Doesn't seem like a very good way to bug somebody's phone, but I think it was more of an intimidation process.
That's that sort of thing has happened to me a lot. Mm-hmm. And we even caught them 3 times messing with our Comcast cable at my office. And so we had our phones through Comcast as well. And we had things like you said, you would be listening on the phone and there's someone else on the line and you hear them make a noise in the background. And it was a mistake on their part. They didn't mute themselves. It was just an open line. So yeah, that happens. And what's so weird is, especially in ufology, this happens. They seem to have an interest, but none of us know any more than they do. People attending MUFON meetings or even those putting them on, it just seems to be a little overkill and a waste of money, in my view.
Yeah, I don't know if they don't want us even talking about it, exploring it, researching it, putting it out there as something authentic. I'm not sure. I mean, certainly I was no threat. I was, a small time, certainly not very public at all. So I really didn't understand the reasons for that, but they wanted some kind of an intimidation process to occur.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are up on a short break and we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Join us in Cincinnati, August the 27th through the 30th for one of the premier UFO conferences in the United States. The MUFON Symposium 2026, UFO Revelations, Impact on Society and Science. This year's event features keynote speakers Alex Dietrich and the intrepid Peter Robbins, along with 8 additional investigators, researchers, and authors presenting the latest developments in UFO research and disclosure. Master of Ceremonies Stacy Wright will guide attendees through 4 unforgettable days of presentations, discussions, vendors, and special events. Register today at MUFONsymposium.com. That's MUFONsymposium.com.
Patriox Oxygen Water addresses a condition called hypoxia, which is insufficient oxygen in the cells and tissues. The fact is that hypoxia triggers 90% of all chronic conditions, including circulation issues, low oxygen levels in the blood, and more. By drinking Patriox Oxygen Water, you can restore oxygen levels in the body, restore energy, reduce age spots, and renew stem cells. Now, as an UNX listener, you can get 10% off of Patriox Ultra High Oxygen Content Water at patriox.us/discount/UNX News, or check the shop page at UNX Network for more information. And we're back with UNX News. I'm Margie Kay, and my guest this evening is Linda Eastburn. And we are discussing a lot of things, a couple of her books, which we'll get into more detail in just a minute. But I'd like to shift over, if you don't mind, to ghosts. And I know that you had some experience when you were at Pythian Castle. I think you were doing some volunteer work there in the 90s. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was a really weird thing. I didn't realize that this old building, which then housed a lot of government offices, and it housed an OCAC business there that helped people, and I volunteered to work with some volunteer programs there, and we did our massive training there, and I spent a lot of time there. Actually, it's an old building, though. It has a lot of history around it. I think it used to be a prison. It was a children's, I think, school or something at one time. It was built for people that, widows and children, I think, at one point. But it's just had a lot of history, and it held prisoners there. In the basement there was cells and things like that, and so it was an odd old building, multi-stories, huge place. Has a whole theater in there. It has just an odd, creaky old building like a castle. And this one woman who was working there, she didn't really believe all the stories about the ghost that seemed to occupy the place. She just brushed it off as strange sounds, just oddities, that was going on there. But she was there working one night, and she told us this story firsthand. So she was there working one night, and I think everyone else had pretty much gone home for the evening. So she had some things she needed to wrap up, so she just continued working. It always felt safe and comfortable in the building, so she didn't think much about it. But she started hearing something that was kind of on the outer parameters of her office, and down the hall, maybe in another room or something. And finally, there was such a noise that she thought, well, someone else must be in the building. She didn't know who or why. So she starts roaming around the building to try to find, what was going on there, when she hears a door slam, and she gets back, and the door to her office had closed abruptly. There was no way, there was no breeze, it wasn't a rickety door that often closed. Nothing was tilted to make it close. So she thinks, well, this is very, very strange. So, but it made her feel very uncomfortable. So she goes into her office, and she's contemplating whether to continue working or to go on home. And she feels some other strange things, some coldness in the room, some very odd things again. Continues hearing those noises outside that she couldn't find any resource for. And she decides, okay, I'm just going to gather this stuff up and go home for the night. I'll come back early in the morning, catch up on my paperwork then, and let it be. So she gathers her things, she heads out the front door, or heads out toward the door, when she hears something call her name. It was a whisper, but it was still calling her name, and she thought, okay, that's it. She was gone, and she did come back to work the next day. She told some other people about this. It was an isolated incident, but something was in that building with her that night, terrifying her.
Well, the location, Pythian Hall. Here's what it looks like, folks. It looks like a giant castle. Is in Springfield, Missouri. They have tours, and they take you on haunted tours if you want. And I did. And the thing is, I felt like the spirits, there were multiple spirits there, but they were backed off. They were just kind of observing. But when we got to the basement, that was a whole different story. Very, very heaviness, dark energy there. One main spirit who seemed to be like in control of things. I wonder what your perception is of that.
Well, I took that tour too, the ghost tour, and I have to agree with you. That basement has some strangeness about it. I mean, it was heavy. It was dark. It was, dark in energy, and some of those halls were so narrow, but you can just almost feel that whatever spirits died there, they have not left yet, because they tended to be there. A lot of revenge kind of energy, just a deep, dark kind of hateful energy around that basement. Mm-hmm. It was just, and it's, that basement is massive. It's not just an open basement. It goes on forever, it seems like, with all those little nooks and crannies and the cells, and, it was weird. And every room I went in had a different feeling to it. I don't know if you experienced that or not, but it was a different sense, or a different energy was in each room.
Yes, and I was actually glad to get out of there, and I do ghost hunting. So I would like to go back with the team, though, with some instruments to kind of, just to get some other feedback and some evidence. So
No, I know a lot of people have captured a lot of orbs, a lot of like ghost images while they were there. And there are some people that go there and do some regular ghost hunting. And, it is a really, truly haunted place.
So what about you? Have you had any ghostly encounters?
Well, I've had some unusual encounters. I'll let people be the judge if this is a ghost or not a ghost, but this was very odd, let me tell you. My husband and I did real estate investing, and we bought this house. It was a 2-story. It had a basement as well as an upstairs, and the basement housed a 2-car garage as well. And we were in the process of remodeling this house. But I just closed down a little antique store. So we had moved all of those antique items, smaller items, into the garage just as storage for a short span of time. So he just purchased a brand new table saw. He was so proud of that because he'd been working with something inferior, and this was a brand new table saw, had it in the kitchen upstairs. And he had been sewing and doing a lot of just rebuilding cabinets and things like that. Quite a bit of work there. But because he had the table saw upstairs, there was a whole bunch of sawdust that had collected all over the floor in the kitchen, the dining room, the living room, and down that hall of the upstairs. So one day he goes to work over there. He's doing some construction work in the house and realizes someone has broken into that downstairs garage and taken some of the items that are in the basement, some of those antique items. So he goes upstairs and he sees that the table saw is also missing, gone completely. So he calls me and I go over there too, and we call the sheriff's office and they come out. Now we tried not to disturb anything that was so they could get all the evidence possible. But the really weird thing about this is through that sawdust, there was one single barefoot footprint. The other foot was missing. You could not have made it around down that hall, around the living room, into the dining room, and into the kitchen was this single footprint, the right foot. Left foot was missing, and it was a barefoot. And it's like, what we pointed that out to the sheriff, and so we just had to chalk this up as the one-legged barefoot bandit because that was what was there, what we saw. But explanation for that. What would have caused that? I don't know.
So it makes you wonder if your items aren't in another dimension. The barefoot bandit, the one-footed barefoot bandit. Oh my gosh.
The one-footed barefoot bandit. Yeah.
Okay, that's a new one. I had never heard anything like that before. So
was it a ghost? Was it Bigfoot? I have no idea. Really, the foot size wasn't big enough for probably a Bigfoot. But it was something very strange that had gone through that house.
Did you ever get the saw back?
No, actually, what happened with this is I decided to remote view where the items were. Never did get it back, but I decided to remote view where it was because, I was pretty new at doing a lot of that at that time. And I was like, well, how do I connect with this? So I thought, hey, I'll just connect with my stuff and see what I see. So this is what I remote viewed. I could tell it was in a kind of a damp concrete type of building. It seemed like a lot of blocks of concrete, around it, and it was dark there. As I backed out of that, I could see a white garage, a small garage, some distance from a house that had white siding, black roof, and black shutters. I could see a fence and an L-shaped kind of road around it. And on the opposite side of that road, I saw a boat that was tarped down with kind of I think it was like a turquoise kind of tarp, about that kind of color, tarped down on top of that. And then I saw a orange gremlin car, if you know what those used to look like.
Oh, yeah.
So that's an old car. But I also saw that at that house, and I got an address. So I later drove by that address. It wasn't the exact number, but it was one number off. There it was. White house, black roof, black shutter, little L driveway, very odd. And the chain link fence, there was a concrete garage back there, and there was the boat with the tarp on it. Didn't see the gremlin anywhere, but everything else was there. So I told my husband about this, and he said, in his disbelief, he said, well, we can't go to the police with a remote viewing story. They'll think we're crazy. So we didn't go to the police, but I feel pretty confident that my stuff was actually in that garage, but we'll never know.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty good remote viewing, especially at the time with you not being that experienced doing it.
Well,
That's
yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah. It was to have that many positive, positive things other than the
Hmm.
gremlin. We never found the gremlin, but everything else was just spot on. And it was an area of town I wasn't familiar with. Had no idea about the house. So
Well, speaking of remote viewing, you do some classes
mhm.
for people, business and spiritual classes, and you've combined the two. Explain what that is.
Well, what I found with my intuition, which I was developing pretty strong, whether you do it through a controlled remote viewing process or just an intuitive process, either way, you get information. And my husband and I were real estate investors, and so I found that I could utilize that intuition toward things that would assist us in our business. So the book I just wrote called Spy Your Way to Power and Success is about that very thing. It's called Superpowered Intuition, and it's about utilizing your intuition to help you with whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish in life. And not everything's about money, but certainly a lot of people want to do the best they can with a business or do the best they can with whatever endeavor that they have. So that book is helps people, and I have a course that goes along with that book, helping people to use their intuition to kind of see opportunities in the future. Now, I'll tell you one that happened to me, and I kind of back engineered my life to come up with this book, along with a physicist that helped me understand the actual physics process that's going on when this happens. We think we're pretty accurate on that. But there was this auction that was coming up, and we were small-time investors way back in the 90s. We didn't have a lot of cash on hand, but we went to a lot of open houses just to see what was available out there. There was this 222.22 acre horse ranch.
Hmm.
Had a really nice new home with 8,000 square feet of space, 3 stories, beautiful pool, a lot of outbuildings. This was so far beyond our reach as investors at that time. This place had sold for like $1 million several times. So, but it was a Sunday afternoon. We didn't have anything else to do. We decided to go ahead and go to the open house, even if it was out of our price range. So we looked at it. It was gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. Everything about it had these wrought iron gate, the opening that went up a hill, and trees along the side, this beautiful big front porch, huge 3-car garage. I mean, it was just picturesque. It was wonderful. So we toured it, and then we're driving around the property, and on the way back to the house in the field, suddenly I got this intuitive download, and I said it out loud. When that happens, I know to listen, and I can't keep it out. I just have to say it. And it was, this is going to sell for $300,000. My husband looks at me and says, if this sells for $300,000, we need to buy it, because we knew what that place was worth.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have $300,000, of course. And in an auction, you have to come up with all the cash immediately in 3 weeks if we got the bid, which what are the odds if we go for $300,000? But when it comes in like that, I trust it. We went to the bank and got approved for the loan. And then we just had to come up with the down payment that we needed. We didn't have that either. So within that week, now this is the bizarreness of the connectedness of how minds communicate. But within that week, a man called and wanted to pay cash and close that week for a little Quonset hut garage we owned close to his house. Didn't know the guy from Adam. He just wanted to buy that. And another guy called and wanted to buy a little storage building we had. Between the two sales, which both closed that week, we only had 3 weeks till the auction. But between those two, we had the exact amount of money for the down payment on the house. And we went to the auction, and we had the bid at $300,000. It was just a few seconds after we had that bid, the auctioneer says sold, and we bought that house for $300,000, worth about $1 million.
Wow.
So
What a success story.
That's the kind of thing I thought, if I could bottle that and give it to people, that would be worth something. So that encouraged me to come up with the book, Spy Your Way to Power and Success, and to help people to understand that kind of information is available to you if you can just access and get to it. So I teach classes to help people to get to that level of trusting your intuition, accessing your intuition, and knowing that information is available for anyone.
And where can people go to get a hold of your books and take your courses?
You can go to my website, which is just lindaeastburn.com, or you can go to Amazon and find my books.
All right. Good old Amazon. um, Interesting stuff. We're going to have to talk some more later after the show. And also, when we do sign out, if you would hang in the green room for me so that the show will process, that would help. So we've got a few more minutes. Is there anything else, I don't know, extremely unusual that's ever happened to you that you cannot explain?
Well, lots of things that have happened to me that I cannot explain, but let me look through my notes. I put some things down that, one day I was at a restaurant here in town. Now, this may be something or maybe nothing, but it was a little odd. You've probably heard of Men in Black. But I was sitting at this restaurant, and I've never really had experiences with Men in Black, but I was the only one sitting at this bar. I was just having a glass of wine in the afternoon, and it was kind of an L-shaped bar, small little place. It was only the bartender and I in there. And this guy walks in, and he's all in black. He has a black tie, black shirt, black jacket, black suit. He has black hair, slicked black, black sunglasses, and his skin was very odd. It looked almost leathery dark. It was very, very strange. He sat down where I could see him because I was at the L shape at the bar. He sat down, ordered a drink it. You couldn't even tell he was swallowing. I mean, he just drank it so fast. He ordered another and another. He looked straight ahead. He said nothing. He looked nowhere. He just behaved very strangely. But when he got up and left, I noticed, and I think it was because of the alcohol he was drinking, because he hadn't had time enough to react to that. But he was just walking at this very odd, strange gait that I saw. And he walks out the door, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I think I just saw a Man in Black, because he was just so different, so very unusual. It just didn't fit any norms that come into that little location. So that was kind of a strange thing that happened.
Well, they say extraterrestrials are walking among us and have forever.
Yes.
So maybe. I know other people have had encounters like that. I had an encounter at a UFO conference once, and I walked outside, and here is this 7-foot tall man, which was a little unusual. He had dark hair, and he was talking to a group of people. When I glanced over, I noticed he had no energy field, zero, no aura, as some people call it, and then he was talking to this group. Then he suddenly turned his head and looked directly at me at a 90-degree turn. He knew that I had seen that. And then the rest of the conference, he disappeared. He was never there again. Never saw him again. And that's another thing. I know you've had some conferences. You've held some conferences in Springfield, and you've attended a lot of conferences. And you've also been a speaker. Have you ever had any possible encounters with ETs at these events?
I don't think so that I'm aware of. Now, I may have and not been aware of, but, sometimes I remote view various things, and the ETs are aware that you're remote viewing them. I'm not sure if you've ever had that experience, but that happened to me one time. I was actually doing an intuitive session for someone that it was a blind remote viewing session. I didn't know the question, but I saw 4 structures. And when I turned the question over, it was about what's on the moon. But what I recognized was when I was looking at those structures, there were entities on the moon, knowing I was viewing the moon. So that was a little creepy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's similar things have happened to me as well. So what's next for you? What do you have coming up?
I have
conferences.
I don't have any conference. I'll be teaching at the Ozark Research Institute in September on that spy thing, that the spy book, manifesting through your intuition. I'll be teaching down there. I'm also on a lot of podcasts this summer, so watch for those. And then I'm also working on a new book called Symbology. Symbolocity, actually. That came to me in a dream. And it's about how the world around you actually speaks to you in symbols that we sometimes don't comprehend or understand, but there's always sending a message to us. So the same way we can interpret dreams or interpret messages through meditation, we can also interpret physical life experiences that happen to us. So it's kind of a quirky little book that I think people might get a lot of. There's also a dictionary in the back, which incorporates, animal energies, as well as, things, people, places, locations, all kinds of weather patterns, things like that might be speaking to us.
There's another phenomena I wonder if you are familiar with. We just have a few more minutes. People are starting to see the matrix or the AI world that we live in seeing these patterns and numbers covering walls and ceilings and buildings, things like that. Have you had any experience with that, or have you regressed anyone who has?
No, but that sounds really fascinating. I can see that being the case because, as you move back through the matrix, things like digit down from numbers into physical objects, and we seek a rather refined finished product of our reality world here. But if you go back, 2 or 3 steps deeper into that, it's a real skeleton kind of a vision that you have back. It's very different than here, kind of cold and indifferent too. We have a lot of soft tones in our reality. And I have seen some of that. I've seen, I remember a long time ago seeing that you would not want to live, back there in that matrix because it can be really harsh.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It seems to me that things have stepped up, that the timeline has stepped up. People are waking up and more people are coming forward with experiences that never had any before, or they're just, increasing. And also the star children, the very, very young children coming in now seem to be extremely intelligent and far beyond their parents. Are you seeing that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that they're going to live in a whole different world than you and I. They're 10 years from now, we won't even recognize, I think, the reality that we hold. They're prepared for that. They're born with that. I think. Also, I think that, just all of the AI and the computers and all the gaming, that a lot of people have done, it changes your brain. So I think we're going to create, our life has created a completely different species. And it's one that can handle the next level of reality, I think, that's coming down the line.
Do you think that AI is a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it could go any direction. I think that, we're right now focused on the bad things that's going to come from this. Of course, I think it's just a tool. And I think it depends on the morality surrounding it. If it's used in positive ways, I think it could be a useful thing. If it's just used for power and money and control and things like that, then it could be a super detriment in our world.
Well, I tell everybody AI is my new best friend, but I'm scared to death of it.
Absolutely. That's where I stand with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Linda, thank you so much for being on the program with me this evening. I know I'm going to have you come back very soon to discuss some other things that you've got coming up. So get Linda's books at Amazon.com, and also go to her website at lindaeastburn.com and check out her events and everything else that she's got going on. Thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you. Love being here.
All right. All right. Well, that is another episode of NX News. And keep in mind, we've got the Woo channel coming up pretty soon. And I'm going to be, I'll have a show on that network too. And so for now, thank you. And we'll see you next week.